I'm Veronica Roberts. I'm the curator of modern and contemporary arts, and thank you all for coming today. I am an avid letter postcard writer, old school snail mail person, and I was walking with my dear friend Perry Nelson in Austin. God, how many years ago was this? 4 or 5 years ago, we were like taking a walk, and I was saying, gosh, Ellsworth Kelly should be on a stamp. Like that art is so perfect for stamps. And we were chatting about this, and Perry took it upon herself to do all this research and how you could nominate someone. And then she was like, there's this amazing person named Derry Noyes. And then I never really followed up because I'm a very busy curator. And then she just made them and they appeared. And Perry and I were like, our dreams have come true, and we didn't even have to do the actual process. So I was so thrilled. But it was funny because we had this lecture series, which is to introduce Kelly and kind of different facets of his life and his work. And there was one on Kelly and birds and his service in the Ghost Army in World War II. And so I was like, how perfect that we could do Kelly and stamps. But tracking you down was nearly impossible. I think it took us Lynn and I maybe spent 6 months trying to track her down. She was in a witness protection program. The post office really does not like to release information, and we were about to give up, and then suddenly you called, and was fated from there. So I really want to thank my colleague Lynn Mayfies. Where is she? She's in here somewhere back there. Lynn and I tracked her down and have had passionate conversations about stamps. And Krista Ramirez, who always makes everything run so smoothly here. Thank you so much, Krista. So this is our last Kellyanne lecture series. There is some homework for all of you. There is an interactive component, which is that since we have the greatest stamp designer, in my opinion, in the building, I think you all need to think about, and you have the rest of the talk to do this, think about who has not yet been put, what visual artist has not yet been put, no frogs, no birds, has not yet been put, not alive, and dead, sorry, it has to be dead, sorry, dead artist. That makes it easier, actually. So you all need to be thinking about your favorite dead artist who's not yet been on a stamp, who you think is perfect. And one of my favorite dead artists, Agnes Martin's a terrible idea. So you got to think about the stamp, right? You got to think about the stamp, and we'll learn. Part of the reason I'm making you do this only at the end is that she will talk about kind of what goes into thinking, what kind of works work well as miniature masterpieces. So that's your assignment. And we will be polling you at the end. You will also have a chance to ask questions and not just do homework. We will leave plenty of time for Q&A, but we will be ending sharply at 1 since a lot of you have desks to get back to and other things. So we will be ending on time. And I also just wanted to begin, though, by sharing some of these incredible postcard collages that Ellsworth Kelly made. He had his own relationship to stamps. He was himself a wonderful letter writer. And there's a body of work where he took postcards. This is a Manhattan postcard he's turned on its side, and he's collaged this red and black and white bits of paper and turned these postcards into sort of miniature works of art. We had a great talk just about Kelly and postcards with Trisha Paik, and that's on our website. We have all of our talks recorded on our website. And then here's another one, just to give you a sense of how he uses postcards to make art. And I know that I believe there's going to be a show of these in the future soon. They're really fantastic. And also sometimes they're very different from we think of him as a great abstract painter, but there's some really wonderful ones that are kind of naughty and figurative, and they're great. But let's talk about Ellsworth Kelly and the Kelly stamps. I should just add that when Kelly lived in Paris on the GI Bill after World War II, and he was there for almost 7 years. And it was his time in Paris, and especially his time in cathedrals and churches, that inspired the chapel that we have here now. But when he came back to the US in 1954, he worked at the post office, and he sorted mail at night, and that was his night job. So he also actually worked for the post office, so it's kind of perfect. This was all meant to be. All right, but I would like to introduce Derry Noyes, who is the art director for the United States Postal Service, and a very hard woman to track down, so you're so lucky to have her here. And you have been you've been designing stamps for 36 years, right? 36,
since 1986, something like that.
Since 1986, okay. And you have a really fascinating biography, but I'm going to ask you more about your career and some of the stamps that you've made as we sit together and have a conversation. So please join me in welcoming Derry to the chair. And there's bonus points if you recognize which artist made the brooch that she's wearing. But okay, bonus points at the end. Lots of opportunities here. So, so can we talk a little bit, before we talk about Ellsworth, how did you get into designing stamps? Because that doesn't seem like something you could be a kid and say, I want to be the best stamp designer. Like, how does that happen?
It was serendipity. I didn't know very much about stamps. I never collected stamps. I never really looked at them. And I had a professor of mine from graduate school who was a well-known designer, Bradbury Thompson, who did design stamps. And he asked me, would I be interested in being on the committee, Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee, which is this committee that meets every couple of months to talk about what goes on these stamps. And I said, sure, but I don't know anything about stamps. He said, listen, Derry, you can do this. Whatever the design capability you have goes into designing something this big as this big or huge. And it's the same mentality, and I know that you can do this. So I said, sure. And that's history. That was in 1982, I believe, that I was on the committee and then became an art director a couple of years later.
And so who else is on the committee? Like, tell us what this committee is like.
The committee is made up of historians, people from all different backgrounds, at sort of at the best of their capability in each one. So you get a breadth of people. There might be a couple of people who are designers or art related, but others who are sort of know literature, know history, know science, know whatever the discipline is, so that you're getting the best of the best for the research. And they try to have a real diverse subject matter on stamps. Not obviously, art is just one component.
Okay.
For art history, I mean, for American history.
Okay, and then in order to actually have a stamp made, does somebody on that committee put forward an idea, or does it have to come? Can it come from the public? Like, how does that process work? Both. Okay. And so someone might say, I really want Harriet Tubman to have a stamp, and then you guys discuss it as a committee, and then do you have to get approval from someone in order to do it? Like, what are the next steps once you all unanimously agree that, Harriet Tubman should be a stamp?
It has to be unanimous in the committee, and then we as art directors get assigned each subject, and then we proceed to figure out, is it going to be a portrait, is it going to be illustrated, is it going to be photography, will it be, the difference between someone like Harriet Tubman, that would be in the Black History series, and that has a sort of a format, typographic, as well as being a single portrait. But you can change who the artist is.
Okay.
And so that's where the little worker bees get to action, and then we have to present our ideas to the committee, and it goes through a whole process, and then the legal team, and and eventually the committee has to approve it, and then it goes to the Postmaster General, and she has to approve it.
Okay, I like that the Postmaster General is she.
She's retiring, but she came up inside the post office, and she's been very interested in the stamp program. Some are more so than others.
Okay. And then we were hoping we'd have a surprise guest for you, someone who was your boss, I guess, for 20 years, but he has a sinus infection, so he wasn't able to come. Retired. It seemed quite interesting when I talked to him, but he was telling me, and maybe you know about this as well, that before there was a committee to do this, that it was really pretty bad, because it was like every senator was trying to get like their state on the stamp, or like they wanted, the electrical union, or like it was like specific political kind of agenda. So I don't know so when did this committee form?
I'm not sure when it started, but there was a fair amount of that lobbying stuff going on for many years. I had certified public accountants was one of my very first assignments. Oh my God, what am I going to do with that?
No offense to any public accountants.
No, I know, but think visually. They come up with these great ideas. Anyway, as the artist, trying to think, how do you make somebody want to put that on an envelope? That still exists. Yeah. But it's gotten better.
So in terms of, but you haven't just done art design, right? I mean, you've done, so what are some of the other things that you've ended up being able to design?
All of them. We all do all of them. There are 4 art directors, and we get assigned all these different, some are famous things that happen in history. You try not to make it negative, like wars
Right.
and death and destruction so much, but it's American history and our breadth, our history of important people and important things that have happened throughout history. And I've learned actually an enormous amount of history through stamps
That's really cool.
that I didn't get in school.
You know,
Since
it's
I wasn't a
interesting-
history major.
It's interesting that you say that because we have an amazing work by an artist named Sonia Clark of Madam C.J. Walker.
Yes,
and I
she
remember
was on
that
a stamp. Yep.
from when I graduated from college. And I don't know, does anyone know who Madam C.J. Walker is?
She
She's
started
the
her own
first-
business.
She's the first self-made female millionaire in this country. And she was an African-American woman who made her fortune in the beauty and hair care empire before the civil rights movement, before the feminist movement. So it's kind of like, how did I not, know that
And
until...
the cool thing is when you get these assignments and you've never heard of the person, you think, this is the fun part, is doing the research and finding out why is this person going to be on a stamp. And I've got numerous examples like that because and then you have to figure out, okay, now that I know about this person, how am I going to make it work at this size and
Okay.
da-da-da.
Yeah. All right. So can we talk? You wanted to show everyone the complete let's see, 10. Am I counting right?
There are 10.
10 works. And of course, so you proposed Ellsworth, right? You proposed him as an artist, or was it among a group? A
Yeah,
lot of
and
you
then
thought of this?
roundabout goes through the committee, and you get a sponsor on the committee who then really proposes it. you
Okay.
know. So as an art director, though, I thought it felt like it would work well. You look at that and you think, at this size, that's going to work.
Okay.
And he's worthy.
And he's worthy, but wasn't he alive when you proposed him, or no? Or was he already had he already passed away?
He had already passed away.
Okay, all right. So, and so then choosing work, how did you pick specifically which works? Because you also have to deal with copyright and getting permission for all of this?
In the very beginning, you just look and look and look, go through books and start thinking vertical, horizontal, what size, only paintings, do we want to get a little sculpture in there? So you just play, and then how's the type going to work? How do you want his name? Is that going to be dominant? Is it going to be, let the art speak to itself? And you have to have the USA Forever. It used to be a denomination in the terms of type. Is that going to be fighting with the art, or is it going to be, in the background? So start that way, and then gradually it has to narrow down to what you can really use. And do they work individually as well as together? Will it work large as well as small? Will it? Is there enough variety to show his breadth? It's all of these things, are constantly in your mind as you're going through this. Will something like that black and white one be too dominant when it's with the others on a page? So it's how they work together as well as how they work individually.
And this is really fun because you can't find this on any website, is looking at what you, here they are, all of them together. Oh, and so you were talking about this amazing one, South Ferry.
South
the black
Ferry,
and
that
white
one, I was worried that it was going to be too dominant, but you play around with the placement and how they work together. And I like the sculptural one, sort of catty corner to the flat, sort of picking up on the red and blue. And how they speak to each other, but they work individually as well.
And there's something nice about the rectilinearity of the squares and colors for a large wall, but then the sort of oval shape of the yellow, like you played the shapes off really nicely. I feel like in the way you're creating this, designing the stamps on the page is very much like a curator. Like we think about the placement of one work next to another. I mean, what you're describing sounds very familiar. And I think it's so interesting that one was kind of a problem child until you put it on the edge, and then it kind of balanced nicely. Because I'm really glad you did one black and white,
Me too.
And I have a few friends who this is their favorite one. Not mine.
Well, and then there's one other tiny little thing that you design, but what you don't think about, eventually you're going to have that little date. And that little date is showing up every year. It comes in a different quadrant. And this year, I didn't know which quadrant that would be in, and it was the upper left, and I had all the art sort of higher up, flush to the top, and suddenly I had this little dot that was fighting with it, so I had to lower the art a little bit to get away from it and put it in gray so it didn't look like a little like a little bud.
Oh, that's so interesting. This is the thing you never get to see on a website. These are the sort of rejects, or some of them. I guess some of them made it, but this is sort of like some of the early.
And you see no date in the upper left, so they're all flush to the top. And I had to like deal with that date at the top. And I worked also with Mr. Shear, Jack Shear, his husband, his comments. So we'd work back and forth and figure out which ones he liked, which ones he didn't like, how would the horizontal square work with the more vertical ones.
I think this is fascinating, because those collages in the lower right are quite wonderful in person, but really, to me, don't work as stamps at all.
Totally.
You know,
but
as
you
soon
have
as
to
you
try
see
it.
that, you figure
try
it out.
it and you go, ooh, nope, not going to work.
Yeah.
And this one, I don't know what it's called, but that was the alternate to Black Fairy on the upper left.
Yeah. The black one. Yeah, that's wonderful.
He really didn't want me to use that one.
Okay. So funny.
But the good thing about this is that I was working with Jack Shear versus different museums and all the different, unwieldy when it gets to be too many different sources and getting the rights. And so in that sense, this was simpler than other jobs with
too many cooks in the kitchen.
You got it.
No, it's better to have one cook. I agree, or one other cook. And this seems very. I'm just looking at Christian, who works closely with Carter Foster. Carter and Christian just worked on an Ellsworth Kelly book for the chapel, and it sounds very similar, right? You're looking at end papers, and you're looking at which work should be on the cover of the book, and there's lots of back and forth about that, and so it's also very similar to a book design as well, and. Here are
more possibilities, and you can see some of them came in from Jack Shear.
Yeah.
And I just had to try them out to see, well, will they actually work as stamps? So let's put them in there. Let's put all the type in there, and let's just see which ones hold up and which ones don't.
Do the museums ever give you any grief with using them, or do they all say yes once an artist?
They don't all say yes.
They don't all say yes.
No,
Really?
There's so many layers of red tape.
So do you do what we do, and do you try to consolidate lenders? Like when I'm doing a show, I'll try to use a couple of museums a lot and not borrow from 50 museums, but borrow from 4, just so that I don't have the pain of having to deal with all of them.
Right, and you get people you work well with.
Yeah, exactly. So did you do that too, where you sort of like...
In this case, it was more simplified because of Jack Shear.
Right, because he could sort of open those doors and make sure you got the permissions you needed.
He was completely...
I know you can't tell us who the private collection is, but if I were a private collector and I was the only one on the stamps with all those museums, I'd be so excited, and I'd buy like 300 sheets.
Well, this has come up in the past. We used to have a member on the committee who was adamant that all images of art came from museums and not private collections. And we kind of struggle with that, because sometimes the best examples really are in private collections. And will it enhance the value of the art by being on a stamp? I mean, many discussions on all this.
Wow.
I can't remember which one it was where we finally broke that rule, because I really wanted this on a stamp. It might have been the George O'Keeffe one. I can't remember. In any case, we've crossed that bridge.
Yes.
We're okay with it.
And some economists should study if
And
the
it doesn't
stamp
enhance the value.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, I don't
just to
think so.
us, just to people in this room. So let's talk about the selvage. Is that the term? Selvage? Do you guys know what selvage is? Selvage, can you explain?
The stamps are what you put on envelopes.
Yeah, let me grab one.
On the side, at the top, the title, or an image that we wanted to show what he looked like, but if I just put his portrait on the stamp, then you would say, well, who is this man? What does it say about what he
This is the selvage.
makes? And this is the beauty of doing an artist. You can actually put on the stamp what they do versus what they look like. But it's nice to see what they look like as well as see what they made. So in the selvage, I had hoped to use this photograph in front of his art. If we were to use his portrait in the selvage. And so the next example is that. But so wait a second. So then Jack Shear came back with these other possibilities, because he really didn't like the image of this one. Or maybe he said Ellsworth Kelly really never liked that photograph. So he gave me these alternates. So I tried them. But first, this was my first stab at this job.
Isn't this fascinating to see like the earlier versions? Yeah.
And that's also, you know, it's before you've cleaned up the backgrounds and they're still all gray. And there's different solutions for the stamps. But that's sort of the process. You start there. And then there was another one, now with South Ferry in there instead of...
Right, so this one you had the earlier one. Then
And at this point, Jack is saying, yeah, he's liking it. Let's change some of the stamps. But he was still okay with the Selvage. And then he changed his mind. So, so then we tried other portraits.
Such a handsome man. All right, and then you tried that.
We tried that. That's that same photograph, but not as the full length, but trying to crop it. Then we tried one more, which really didn't work very well, I didn't think. It's just not very strong. Then I tried to say, well, let's try a piece of art. I tried that, and he didn't go for that, so he decided on this one. So it's collaboration.
So is this a detail of a work of art? Yeah. Okay.
It's wider.
Wider, and so I think it's quite.
He said it was okay. I mean, it was his decision.
To crop.
I didn't
Exactly.
crop it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's actually quite beautiful. I mean, it is nice to see a person and what they look like, but I think there's something particularly fresh and sort of contemporary about this. So it's really great. But then you still had works on here. No, this is the final one. No, this
is the final one, and so as a consequence, we never got his portrait in there. And it's fine. It's just, you know, sometimes it's nice to do that, which you'll see, you know, later as there are other examples. When we've done artists, you get to have that combination and see what they look like.
Okay, fantastic. So we wanted to share some of the other projects, stamps that you've designed. This is only a very short list, actually, of the ones that she's done. But you may recognize, and we have some that we can pass around as well. I think, do you want to cue the other? We'll start screening, sort of show you on a slideshow. This way that when you come up with your artist, maybe they've already been done. Like if any of you were going to do George O'Keeffe, it's done. Hopper, done. So
that's actually the
Perry
last
Nelson's
one.
favorite.
I think
Edward
it must be
Hopper.
back.
Yeah, this is quite beautiful.
I think that's the last one in the circle.
Okay, that's the last one in the circle. So is there a way of press? Yeah. Okay, there. I have never. These are beautiful. I had never seen these before.
This was my very first assignment.
Oh, just gorgeous. Well, you can tell by how much money the stamp cost.
Right.
22 cents.
And they had 50 stamps on a page.
I mean, amazing.
And there's only 4. It's a block of 4. Wow. And that was my second.
Okay, now
assignment.
that with the photos, very striking.
And I wanted to show her as an older woman. Actually, I worked with Margaret Bauer, a designer, on this one. And
Amazing.
and that's when we could use quotes. We're not allowed to use any quotations anymore.
Oh, I love that one.
So this is the example of using the portrait with the art, so you see what he looked like. This one was challenging in that the size scale difference. There's a very big stable next to a maquette, next to a mobile. This was designed by Kessler.
Fantastic. Look at Louise.
And this is when they were licking stamps, obviously.
Totally fantastic. Yeah.
This was 20 different stamps. You could never do this in this day and age with the legal nightmares.
Oh my gosh.
But
That's
you
so
know, just once in a while. And
Oh my gosh.
I'm working with the curator from Princeton Museum on that one.
Okay. Is this outer space? I think it'll keep going. Let's give it one more second.
Is there a place you can find these online? Is it what you've done?
I think it's eBay or something. I mean, I don't know. Oh, you mean this designed by Kessler again?
Sorry, this one's a really bad image. This one's actually so beautiful in person. This is just super pixelated.
Yeah, it's low res.
It's
She
not-
sent it to me the other day. I wanted to include some of the other art directors' work, and this one, also 12 different designers, and could never do it in this.
I
day
recognize
and age.
that name.
That was my father, so I got to work on that.
Was he still alive? when
But
you
that
worked on
design should go to Margaret Bauer. We worked
Okay.
together on that one. I just want to give credit where credit's due.
That's an amazing one. I remember that one so well.
Well, and if we ever get back to that one, the interesting thing about that is what she did with the typography and the color and the shifting of the stamps so that they're not all lined up. So you could just plunk a typewriter on a white background. It would be sort of a boring looking stamp.
Yeah.
And so it's really, that's where the graphic design comes into this versus just showing art. This, I worked with Margaret Bauer on this one as well. See how she's done the same thing with the typography and the color and the shifting and keeping the rectilinear idea into the type that's architectural. This one I designed.
This is
and 16 stamps, worked with Eames Demetrius on this, and a lot of collaboration went into this one.
that one's really amazing, and I love the way. I guess is a selvage. Would you still call that selvage?
And
if
it's
in the
bullet into the middle.
I think there's something very cool about that.
This is Margaret Bauer again. She's an
But
amazing
he's one of my
designer.
favorite artists, but I think he's not maybe as ideal for a stamp. Like there's so much rich texture to a collage that you can't quite get.
This was a stamp series that was supposed to be for coal miners. And we made it by using Louis Hine photography to show off the Made in America early 20s, 30s, instead of new art. This one, also Margaret Bauer with Derry. I mean, the two of us collaborated a lot. And different size stamps, and you also would never be able to do this. Antonio Alcala designed these just recently.
Beautiful. These are beautiful.
I blew one up just so you could see it as a single.
Self-taught artist named Martin Ramirez. Fantastic. And then the difference. Oh, and then
And then this is just sort of more traditional art reduced down to see the challenge of how does that hold up this big, and it's harder.
It's harder.
It's much harder. It's not as good. That's why you can see how Ellsworth Kelly is a no-brainer at stamp size, whereas this is not so much. Also, just showing fashion design. It could be textiles, whatever. But this was sort of an interesting assignment of different kind, and using his portrait, which up there is a stamp as well. And that folds in half, that sheet.
That's cool the way you use the portrait as a stamp too.
And this is just part of the American Treasure series. I just scanned the actual
My grandmother
stamps.
loved these stamps.
Well, the thought behind American Treasures was to have stamps available for the general public that were pleasing, colorful, flowery, just that most people like, but also well-known artists. So it's a little bit of art history tucked into general niceness. And then these, I just couldn't wait to show off these guys. We got to do these guys.
Amazing. We have a G's Ben quilt on view right now. So.
But it's the litmus test. Will the general public like it? So it can't be too edgy.
Yes,
it has to
right.
be colorful and nice.
Think about that,
for
people.
everybody. Yeah, if it's too edgy, in this series, the American Treasure series was supposed to be just pleasing, really, not too artsy.
Do you have a question?
I just noticed that on the majority of them, there were several different images, and on the hopper, there's just one. Is that like?
You have to get more rights to do multiples, and sometimes it's just as effective to have a single stamp as to do multiples. I think, yeah, and we tried multiples for her, and this is the one that came from our private collection. Actually, this is the one.
Oh, this is the
and
one.
And I said, oh my gosh, we have to use this one.
Yeah.
And so I battled that one. This one, I kept them in rows because when you mix them up too much, it gets a little too complicated.
Yeah.
So just to calm it down. But do you see the tiny little wires? We had to beef those up so that they would hold up at stamp size, because when they're large, they just disappear if you just reduce the art.
Of course, that's so fascinating.
And then
the times that you're shifting the size, I really love. Like some of these stamps, the Pollock, for example, is bigger than the Arthur Dove or whoever else was on that.
Right.
So is that hard to pull off? Is that particularly challenging?
That is totally, and that one and that was Ethel Kessler's. We'll see it, and we just said, why not just let that stamp be super big? Most people won't use really big stamps, but we said, in this case, why not? Yeah. This one, also just keeping it all the black and white and grays.
So beautiful. I still have some of these.
Yeah.
Only special people get them.
Yeah.
So why not quotes? Why did you have to lose the quotes?
Because there were misquotes with Maya
Angelou?
Yes. You meant the bird, the caged bird, whatever that was. Apparently she didn't really say that, or it was misquoted, and it was on the stamp, and the Postal Service got a lot of flack for that. So we better not just have any words at all.
So sad, all the things that
and on the backs of these, there are little biographies or little notes about each person. And none of that anymore either.
I liked that. Those were so great.
It's because the Postal Service gets sued.
Oh.
that why Ellsworth doesn't have history on the back of his?
Yeah.
So nice.
And no quotes anymore. No
I guess
nothing.
you just have to
that
look
has
on
a lot of
Wikipedia.
verbiage on the back of that one. And look, it was 41 cents, so it shows you how long ago that was.
So your father was an industrial designer. So were you exposed to some of these artists or art growing up? Was that part of your kind of,
Yeah.
just your life?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what did he
Totally.
do? What did he design?
Well, he was an architect and industrial designer, and he knew all these people. He knew the Eameses and the Calder and Noguchi, and so my childhood was really in the midst of knowing them. So when having this convergence of doing these stamps and being able to bring that with me to it, it was great.
Yeah. So that's a
Yep.
Calder brooch, and
This is
I'm
a
giving
Calder
away
pen.
I said I would
Which
ask you all, but I'm just telling you.
he made for my mother.
He made it for your mother? Oh, that's so
Yeah.
great. Does it have letters?
MN.
Because he, MN.
And which is actually my initials too. My real name's
That is
Margaret.
so beautiful. That is so beautiful. And then the Noguchi family, you got to know a little bit too.
Well, him.
Him, okay, right,
Yes,
him.
yeah.
An amazing,
Yeah.
amazing artist.
Wasn't able to collaborate or work with anybody on that one. He had died, and whereas with the Eameses, I got to work with his grandson,
Yeah.
and with Calder, I worked with his grandson
Sandy.
and his daughter, Mary.
Yeah, and Mary.
So that helps when you know a member of the family, because
Yeah.
then they're collaborating with you, and you know that they're
course.
going to like the end.
You have their sort of sign off, and absolutely. And then what are the most popular stamps in general? Like what are
flags.
Flags. So boring.
Flowers, flags, birds. You know, no brainer.
Yeah, okay.
So if you can, that's why the American Treasures, like Martin Johnson Heed, it pulls those two together. If you can possibly bring in art that's of a artist of high caliber and please the general public, then they'll sell more stamps.
Right.
I think actually something like this sold though really well too, and even though it's not in that category.
Yeah, and I think there's been Amish quilts too, right?
The Amish quilts were part of this series.
Same
yes.
series, okay. And Edward Hopper. I mean, you really should bring those back. Those were so good.
I'm trying to figure out how to get John Singer Sargent on a stamp.
Yeah.
But it's all the aristocrat English women, you know, and that just isn't the American. You got to make sure that the subject matter is also in keeping with our sensibilities.
Interesting.
And we're constantly trying to get Native Americans, Hispanic, African American, you know, as much as possible, not just the European history.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. Some of the best ones. Those Navajo rugs are incredible. So in terms of the actual process of making them, like how many of these get made? Do you have any idea?
Oh gosh, it's like, it depends. They're reduced now because the first class mail is, no one's using mail, or very few people in comparison to what they used to, but it's up in like the 500 million or 45 million, or depending on the subject. Now flags would be the most.
Quadrillion.
And so the runs are, it's unheard of, really. I mean, that's what you designing these things, you realize when people were letter writers that you're reaching people in all over the country in a way that is unusual. They don't have to go to a museum to see them. They can just go to their local post office.
Yeah.
So
No, the impact. I mean, the numbers you just described, 500,000, is that what you
Million.
said? Million? 500 million?
I think in some cases.
I mean, that's just like beyond, that's not our visitorship at the museum.
40.
That's amazing.
How many there are printed.
Yeah.
When it's,
Oh, that's
you
right.
know, you can see that, and it's down. They don't want to have any left over. They want to run out. They want to make them. Also, now that they're forever stamps, people can just buy them and you keep using them. So they want to have them scarce. They want to run out.
Right. And this group will make sure that happens. Kelly. We actually sell them in the shop too. So
And buying online when you can't find them in post offices, you can buy them online. which most people don't maybe know.
Yeah, that's how I do it, because it's so much
So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the Ellsworth Kelly stamps do, because it's abstract art. It's not a bird, it's not a flower, but they're colorful and they're cheerful, and they might reach that broader audience that you wouldn't expect doing abstract art or modern art. Like this is a very small audience, this crowd, but I'll be curious to see how they do. They're also kind of large, and people like small stamps to go on postcards or so we'll see. I don't know.
But it's interesting because I think in the same way that we all do more reading of, let's say, newspapers online, the same way we don't send maybe as many letters,
and it's
we send more
expensive.
emails. But then I think in a funny way, what happens is that there's more care. People are more excited to get a letter now than they ever have been. Like, it's like the greatest thing you could ever do for someone, right? They
It's
call
true.
you to tell you how much they appreciate getting a letter.
I know it. When you see a letter with a real stamp on it in the mail, you just savor it. First do all the
Yeah.
bills.
Yeah. Although these are so beautiful. These are so beautiful that part of me thinks that, with your Ellsworth Kelly, I've had to go to the post office to watch and ask them to kind of postmark it just to the left, like so that it doesn't disrupt the stamp so much, because it's so pretty. You made them so beautiful.
Well, that's another thing. The time of year most people buy stamps is holidays. So I brought in a stack of the holiday mail that I received to our last art directors meeting, showing that the stamp that they put on it in black saying "Happy Holidays" completely blocked
Destroyed
out
it.
the stamp.
Yeah.
You can't even see it.
Yeah. Exactly. No, that's right. And then there's always a ceremony, right? Or very
First
often
day.
for the first day. And I don't know if you knew that. I didn't know about that until I was working at the Whitney, and my boss was supposed to speak at the Louise Nevelson ceremony. And I thought that was really cool. And I didn't make the Ellsworth Kelly one, but his studio, his partner, Jack, his husband, opened up the studio and invited the whole
Yes.
town to come, and anyone
Although
who...
they didn't, apparently they made it very difficult to find. I guess they did. They didn't.
Well, it just is difficult to find. It's
yeah.
just like down
I
a
didn't
dirt
go.
road.
I knew people went, but yeah, it's very old-fashioned the way they do this. They have the stamp huge, and they have a little curtain in front that they it drops, and everybody sort of claps. It's from another era.
Amazing. Amazing. So before we open it up to questions for Derry, which I want to do, I would love to hear if anyone has come up with their pitch, not too edgy, remember, has to be dead, artist, for the stamps. Any inspired ideas from the crowd? Anyone you're really wanting to pitch? Genevra.
I don't know, have Joseph and Annie Albers.
Albers. Well, we've used Joseph Albers on a stamp that was called "Learning Never Ends." So these, stamps with a message, you sometimes can find a piece of art that so it looks as if it's learning never ends. So it's instead of commemorating him, and so I've been trying to get him on a stamp, but because he's already been on a stamp, we're in the works. We're in the works.
Oh.
I mean, in terms of trying to get more women artists on stamps, and she's with Ethel Stein. I don't know if you know her. Trying to get more of the textiles and
Great.
and I've got ideas.
But that's a really good one, like Ani Albers and Joseph Albers. That's a great one. Any other suggestions? Yeah, and the puffy coat in the back. Huh,
Jasper Johns. Also, I've got so many layouts with Jasper Johns stamps on it. It hasn't been
alive, though.
proposed, yeah, and you have to wait till he's not, as we call it, sufficiently dead sometimes.
Special term.
But that's actually after someone's died. They have to have been dead for a certain number of years before they get to be on a stamp. It used to be 10. Now I think it's 5.
When Eiffel came up fast.
She's fast, and it's now reduced to maybe 2 or 3 years. Now a president, on the other hand, it's right after they've died. They're the only ones. The others have to wait a little bit. But it used to be longer because people's perception changes over time, and they might not necessarily be worthy of being on a stamp after you see what happens over time.
That's really funny. Okay. All right. Got it. We'll keep going. Any other artists? Yes, you in the front in the green.
Morris and I belong to the Austin Calligraphy Guild, so I was trying to think of someone, Edward Johnston is considered like the
master.
Up Calligraphy.
But, you know, the alphabet's 26, do you have 20? I don't know how that would all work out.
And then you think, what, each stamp would be a letter? A letter?
So the only thing I was trying to think how you'd solve it, and that's what I
Right.
was
Well,
thinking.
that's sort of what,
Metric alphabet.
it would be beautiful.
Could we just put two?
Yeah.
Can I just ask you to clarify, did you say not edgy or not edgy in that one particular Americana?
In that series, American Treasure
So we could
series.
think edgy.
Okay.
So edgy is, yeah, who?
No,
Oh,
just-
But
no,
just what we know about the post office, let's keep that in mind. I have a
they
feeling
want to
it's still
sell
probably-
stamps.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
What
So-
about Keith Haring?
Keith
yeah.
Haring, yeah, good.
How
good.
has that not been
It's
done?
too commercial. I mean,
I think
they might
actually
use it so widely.
we might have even mocked up, and maybe it's definitely been in the mix.
It's like
Keith Haring has,
kind of a no-brainer,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
and I believe Antonio, my colleague Antonio, has already mocked some up. I don't know what's
Cool.
happened to Keith.
Yeah.
Just walking through the gallery here, Charles Price,
Charles Price. Who's that?
I
should
don't know who
Who's
Charles Price is.
Chicago.
Oh, you're thinking Charles White. Charles White.
Oh, Charles White.
Yeah, sorry, absolutely. But those are so intricate. I don't know if those would shrink down. Those are such beautifully done drawings that I think it would be hard to get them small, maybe.
There's some very large, evocative works.
Yeah.
Work, actually.
You know, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I feel like it would be kind of like the Wyeth. It would be a little bit borderline. I'm not sure. Could be. I guess it would be about the selection of works, right? But amazing artist. Sorry if you haven't seen it. Absolutely incredible. Yes, in the back.
Would the committee ever consider somebody who may not have any traditional street cred, but is vastly popular? I'm thinking of somebody way out west like Bob Ross.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think at one time we were looking at outsider art. I think Martin Ramirez actually was the
Yeah,
sort of
self-taught artist,
veering into that category, and it's always about the audience and who's going to buy stamps. Are we doing it just because we should, or is there truly will they be purchased? Because the Postal Service is losing money, as we all know. So we have to make sure it's a fine balance when people deserve to be on stamps, but they also need to sell stamps. So it's and some of them we know are going to be dogs as we go in, but are worthy and should be.
For him, I'm just saying, in terms
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
popularity, in terms of an audience to possibly attract.
And is it an audience that actually buys stamps?
That's a different story.
That's interesting.
And we're always talking about, we designed for youth, for young people. Well, hello, is anybody under age 35 buying stamps?
No.
Or will it come back? Can we interest them again someday? I mean,
Yeah.
Do you reissue, I'm sorry, do you reissue ever?
I think maybe Ronald Reagan was reissued or something. I don't
So
know.
it's rare if an artist does. You in the back and then you. Yeah.
I may mention flags and flowers, though. I'm wondering if dogs would too.
Oh, dogs do.
George Rodri.
Who?
George Rodri, he does the dog painting.
Oh, yeah, good idea.
That kind of dovetails with his
Yes,
point.
that's
'cause
right.
That's a good one because you don't see his work in museums. That's a
That's right.
commercial. That would be an exact example of who you don't, that some curators in this room who shall not name themselves would not be excited by. Yeah.
I have two
Oh, and then who's you?
One is, I've heard that there are more stamps out of circulation than in circulation. Is that still the norm? That and
What do you
maybe
mean?
By virtue of this, that they're
Just not available?
they're just not used.
Purchase and not use. Well, that's actually what the Postal Service would like, because that's how they make money, if they don't have to be, if they're not used. But I don't know the answer. I don't know.
I have a design question. You mentioned that the date
Yes.
moves along.
Yes.
In each
You see it's in the lower
issue
left on
here.
that one.
In as much as the stamps are currency, they have a
They are,
value,
yes.
like money. What other design limitations are required
Well-
for each stamp and plate and sheet? What are your limitations? This is a very wonky.
Well, it's just, you can see you have to have the currency, which is now USA Forever. It's very different than working with a number. Used to be, and I loved the number because that added some element.
Yeah,
Now that one had
not
to
that one, but-
change. That used to have a number, but then it all changed in the middle of that. And so now it's, USA Forever is cumbersome.
The forever floats, but the
You can change it, and the date is always in just a little corner, tiny, tiny, tiny.
And is there a minimum size and a maximum size? you
It's
can
always
do?
the same, that little date.
I meant the whole sheet, sorry. Is there like a
Oh,
minimum?
that changes.
That can change.
And sometime, and this one is unusual. I mean, I'm always trying to shake it up a little. This was shaking it up. But for the most part, you're going to choose vertical or horizontal. Is it going to be the big size or the little size? Is it going to be in a booklet? Is it going to be in a sheet or a pane? How many? Is it going to be a block of 4? Is it going to be a single stamp? Is it going to be a portrait? Is it going to be an artist? Will it be for a modern, kind of edgy or very traditional, depending on the subject matter? All these things that go into, as you get the assignment. Do I know anything about this subject? Not a single thing. Okay.
Yeah. And you had a question.
Oh, so my original suggestion was going to be Tom Lee, but when he mentioned dogs, I thought you could combine dogs and flowers with someone like Sophie Gammond.
Dogs and flowers. Well, the cat people won't buy them.
Yes.
Cy Twombly.
Oh, yeah.
Basquiat.
Yeah. Oh, and Basquiat. Well, now there's an example of edgy and who's the audience, and obviously for people who know artists and love art, there's always going to be that audience, but it's narrow. And is it universally appealing enough? I would think so.
Huh, interesting.
I think he's amazing.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Perry.
How do you get on the stamp committee?
How do you do that? You're appointed by the president, actually, even though the president probably doesn't have a clue.
Yeah.
I don't know how that really works. I mean, for me, it was through my professor, Bradbury Thompson. But and then I wasn't on the committee after 2 years. But the recommendations from outside, and then the postmaster general. It's not the president. Sorry, it's the postmaster general. There's a term, and I don't know how many years it is, and then that can be renewed. And usually they're quite well known in their field. They've come with recommendations, and you're trying to spread out the expertise of who's on it. And it's smaller now than it used to be. It used to be a sort of bigger group of people.
Curator of contemporary art.
Absolutely.
Thanks for pitching.
Yeah.
I was thinking.
Just what she wants to do, sit through these meetings.
Yeah, totally.
More meetings.
Yeah, exactly. No, these would be pretty cool. I also was thinking there's an artist who is not super well known, but I
Yes.
think would be great on the stamp is Agnes Pelton, who's a painter, and she's about to have, she's dead. And she's about to have a major show at the Whitney that was organized by the Phoenix Art Museum, and she's a transcendentalist painter, so the work is very vibrant and vivid. So the name wouldn't be good, the fact that she's no Norman Rockwell, but I think her work is really good. Any other suggestions? Were there any other stamp? Has anyone done Kusama? You must be getting pitched Kusama all the time.
Unbelievable. There's pitch. Oh my gosh, the suggestions, not usually in the art world, but for everything else.
Yeah.
The suggestions that come in, and they're all over the map. So that's what the committee's all about, trying to figure out which ones are worthy and which ones aren't, and who we appeal to. And then they go through each year. Do we have enough for youth? Do we have enough for important, well-known people that are worthy? Do we have enough for fun? Do we have enough that's for flower folks? So it's a balancing act.
And butterfly folks.
Butterflies.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. You first. Go ahead.
Well, thank you both for doing this. It's really cool. But basically, I was just wondering, you alluded to the fact that people aren't writing as many letters. I know the way I engage with postage now is the pre-printed labels. Like, is that something it's a possibility to maybe put things like this on those pre-printed labels?
I think at this moment, no. I think they're competing with that, and I don't know. It's hard to know where the Postal Service is heading. The stamp program is still money-making for them, but it's such a, but it's such a small portion of, it's this huge organization, and this is tiny. But we have fun.
Absolutely.
You know, so.
How many different stamps come out each year?
There's the commemorative stamp program, and then there's the mail use part, and then and it's, I don't know how many issues it is. It's something like issues versus numbers of stamps is something like 40 maybe per year, something like that, of commemorative stamps. And then you get the little booklets and the holiday stamps, and the, you know, they don't count that in the number, 39 to 40 issues, I think.
I will say though that in terms of generationally, my nephews, I think that we just sort of assume people won't send stuff, but my oldest nephew, who's 8, I got him really into postcard writing because he thought it was the coolest thing to write a secret message to his parents when they're in the other room, and we'd like have to go into a little closet. And before he could even write, he got really excited about putting the sticker on, and he would like put it on the corner. It would almost always come off the postcard, and I'd be like, I hope this makes it. And so he was so into that whole like secret, and he writes me postcards all the time. And he's really, the X's, when kids are learning how to write, they're really into doing the X's and O's. So for a while, like he'd dictate the message to me, and then he'd do the X's and O's, and you know, now he can write, and he can write a whole little message. So he's totally into it. So I think we just need to like encourage. We also had a show where we had letter writing in this room, and I thought it was going to be all kids, and like all these, basically the grown-ups like wanted to write a postcard. It was great, and then the shop would mail them. So I think it's just, I think you need to have some stamps on hand though. It's helpful to just like buy them and put them in your wallet or keep them at home and order them online, but it's really, it's not that hard, and kids do enjoy doing it, and they love getting mail. They think that's so fun.
It just takes some educating.
Yeah. I cherish my Batman, the circular.
Oh, the Batman,
the
yeah.
bat signal. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine they make as much money. You can't stick so many on a sheet.
That was Greg Breeding was the art director for that. He's the one art director I think I hadn't mentioned before, but he had so much fun designing those. And I don't know, I think they were very popular, as were Superwoman and whatever. Popular culture is another category that you know, for the die-hard old stamp collectors, going down the tubes. But you know, it's part of American culture also, so.
And the creativity of that design, because it's circular, is really, I feel like when you kind of, it's a little
They
unexpected.
weren't all, there was just the circular part of the logo over time, right?
For special friends.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. They're not that expensive. So I saw so many curator friends were stressing out about how many sheets to buy. I'm like, just get more than you think you need.
Yeah.
That way you actually use them. It's not fun to just have them and not ever use them, you know.
Right. But in
So-
terms of in mass mailings, now more and more, I don't know about you guys, but even for weddings, it's paperless post,
Right,
you know.
right.
And think how much money they're saving,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
But isn't it nice when it's the real deal? It
Yeah.
just feels special.
For
So.
sure. Another question, Geneva.
Is it kosher to collaborate with one institution in particular? Like if you were working at the Art Institute, they have a collection of paperweights that might photograph really beautifully. Like, would that be okay
The
if
kosher
one
part.
institution has a special thing that would work really well as a stamp, or do you try to make sure that you're collaborating sort of more equitably across?
Depends on the subject. You try to represent more than one institution, more than one gallery or, museum. We have the Smithsonian in DC that we can collaborate with and just use their collection, but you try to say, wait a minute, let's represent the middle of the country, the west, the north, the south, and the east, not too eccentric to, specific, right? So, and then who's the audience really for paperweights? Think about it. They're beautiful.
All right, yeah.
So once the committee finalizes a selection, how long from art concepts to the execution to public release? What is that?
It depends. It's years, but once you go through the legal ramifications of going through the families, the states, then you have to have, for any reference material that you use, you have to know who the photographer was that took the photograph before you even go to the artist to use that as reference and get the permission there. You have to get, if it's a person, all the family members have to sign off, and it's not just the immediate family. It's gotten so cumbersome. It's pretty amazing that we can get anything produced at all, really.
Wow. Yeah, Holly.
These ones are so beautiful, but whenever I try to buy international stamps, they're just these boring circle globes.
No, there's great international stamps.
No, they decided to make the circular. That is, and the things that go in that circle now change. But that's sort of like how that series.
You mean the ones to send internationally?
Internationally,
you don't mean, like,
yeah.
Italian stamps look bad.
Yeah.
No,
Oh yeah.
in the US, or at least last time I bought them, they didn't seem to have a huge range of choices.
Yeah.
That's true. There's only one each year, and it changes what goes in that
Right.
circle.
It really speaks to our, like, that just seems like a real
And
indication
some
of what we think
people
of the rest of the
love
world.
those though. They love them. So
Yeah.
That's also Greg Breeding. He's the art director of those. So we each have our assignments, and we all know what we're all working on, and we meet every month, and we all critique each other, and it's a really good group of people.
Yeah.
Did you design the Lady Bird Johnson sheet?
No, that was Antonio Agla.
Okay. I love that you know all these people. This is great. Those were really fantastic. Yeah, the Lady Bird stamps, Lady Bird Johnson. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I agree with Holly. That's a terribly boring stamp.
Yeah.
If I want to send people some beautiful American stamps, can I combine
Yes.
some of these others?
Yes,
to get to
you can put as many as you want.
whatever?
And that's what my children do. They have all stamps, and then you can barely see where it's going. Yeah, you just,
We don't know what the value is anymore because there's no number on them.
right, and you can find out. But I usually just err on the side of putting on a little too much. Put on an extra 15, 20 cents.
Me too. But that is my favorite. When I have this one friend whose dad was a stamp collector, so he'll send me a card, and it'll have 14 stamps on it, and they'll all be birds, or they'll all be Texas related, and they're really old, and he's just combined them to make up whatever it is now, 49 cents or something.
Yep.
And those are so beautiful. They're little works of art. I mean, I don't even care if he writes me anything. It's just
Right.
the envelope is so beautiful. I have it on display in my
Right,
house.
right.
So I think that you're right. Like, let's ignore those bad ones and then just combine the really pretty ones. And usually the post office, if you go, they get a little annoyed when you bring them the letters like that, and you're like,
Yes,
is this
they do.
enough?
Yes.
They kind of look at you like,
Really?
But you can bring them to the post office and be sure that it works. But
Yeah.
But you'll get a lot of points if you do that. Yes.
I was told once by the post office for those international ones, you could only use stamps that actually had numbers on them.
Interesting.
Haven't put that to the test. Thank you.
It was a couple years ago, so I don't know if they'd really value the forever stamp at whatever the current value was.
Interesting. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
The cancellation is a thing,
problem.
and I know that like the university used to have a really great cancellation that had the tower, and like when you go to Ben Franklin, the first post office in the United States in Philadelphia, they have a cancellation. It's a machine, but cancels it with Ben Franklin's autograph on there.
Right.
And I think that that's a future design opportunity.
Yeah.
Right.
For
It's sort of out of our control, at least. We talk about these things all the time, and how frustrating the experience is going into a post office, and how they don't. There's these good products, and people don't even know they exist, and the tellers, they don't know to promote. They're just there to try to move people, and so each post office is different. And some put them up on a wall so you can see what's available, and the little small post offices tend to do that, but the big ones, and the lobbies are, they don't think that way, the retail mentality.
Does anyone? Yeah, and I feel like holiday stamps some years are just terrible.
I know.
And I'm like, I don't want the,
But,
yeah. But and then some years are
But
really
they sell.
good. Yeah, they sell. Yeah, but that's an important market. We need to do better on that. Those should be really special. Those need to. They need your help a little more, I think. All right, we have run out of time. Derry, thank you. This was so wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.